as you can see on the screen, we have the wonderful Dr. Shiva Zarabadi, who's going to be sharing her work with us today, and there's lots of it. Got a really exciting walkabout, if you like, through a whole array of data. So I'm really looking forward to it, and I'm sure you are too. Shiva, I know, is going to introduce herself in a minute in a bit more detail, but just so you know, we will also be using Padlet today, and also whiteboard as well towards the end of the session. So we'll, when she was kind of introduced what she's doing, we'll just pause a little minute and I'll put the Padlet link into the chat, and then you can then engage with some of the data that she will be sharing along the way. Shiva, who's wandering, I think I asked her earlier, how do you want to be described? And she said, oh, wandering in and about academia. So there we are, yes, still wandering.
That's what I am.
Thank you for wandering around here.
Walking around academia. Hello, everyone. And thank you, EJ and Jane, for having me. And I'm so excited to be part of this PhEmaterialists PhEminar third wave. My plan is to talk for about like 55 minutes about my research. But I've thinking about to do some activity with Padlet and also Zoom whiteboard. So you have the choice that while I'm doing the presentation, you can start doodling. So we do the doodling, which I gave, take the idea from Jane Bennett. If you have any colorful pens, or if you have a paper handy, you can use it on the paper and then take a picture of it and put it on the Padlet. Or if you don't like to do that, you can wait till the end when I finish my presentation. Then we open up the whiteboard, Zoom whiteboard, and when we are there, it's not very difficult. You will see, if you haven't worked already with Zoom whiteboard, it is my first time as well. So we collectively draw, write, or doodle at the same time collectively on the whiteboard. And I've just to give you an idea, if you want to start with, doodling during my presentation, on the Padlet, so the idea is that you have the Padlet open and the presentation open. On the Padlet, you will see some of my data. Oops.
I put it on, Shiva, so people can see what they're doing.
Yes. As you see, there are some blue tags, which are mostly text. And the one that EJ is highlighting, it's the instruction of the session, which I'm going to explain it now. But then we have text boxes, Phem text boxes, which is from the text boxes in my research, which I call it as kind of disruptive moments and material moments of my research. So it's very like a different language, different type of writing in there. But I like you to just have a look and to see what you get from there. And then we also have Phem thoughts. It's further down, which is some quotes that kind of I use in my own work. You can kind of entangle with those. And Phem moments, there are, again, some of the experiences of my participants in a text. You have listened to me, which is a voice. Some of you that have been in previous PhEmaterial conferences have heard that. This is an announcement, seed sorted in underground and train stations in London. The rest are in white. The one in whites are all pictures, different stages of my research. And also you will see the red ones at the right part of the Padlet, which they are all videos, short videos. So you can pick any of these, select any of these or all of them, and then after the presentation, you can work with them and doodle. You can put on your doodle on the Padlet or work on the whiteboard. Yeah, is that clear? Does it make sense, everyone? Okay? Okay, shall we go back to presentation, please? Okay, thank you so much. So do you have my slides?
You just have to share your screen again, Shiva, and they'll pop.
Again, I have to do it again.
Yeah, is that all right? Sorry.
Yeah. All right. So, yeah. So in this session, we partake in some of the material and affective moments and movements emerged in my PhD research. I mapped the ontological, epistemological, and ethical possibilities and impossibilities that happen through moments and experiences of transcorporeality, the Stacey Alaimo's term, and transmateriality, Carol Taylor term. Using walking and photodiary as PhEmaterialist multisensory methodologies in my study, I followed 15 Muslim schoolgirls in 2 secondary schools in Southeast London, East Dulwich and Bethnal Green, and mapping relational materialities between things that matter for them in their everyday ordinary practices and experiences. We engage in a series of diffractive movements between virtual and actual material becomings. And I map material interventions into things, bodies, and stories that matter and move with British Bangladeshi Muslim schoolgirls of my study. I draw on Haraway to think, feel, and move with what Muslim schoolgirls matter and think other matters with, what stories they tell to tell other stories with, what matters with them when mattering with others, and how they matter when they matter with their Muslim becoming, which I think about these questions from Donna Haraway, beautiful quote. And I also employ Jane Bennett's creative and absorbent I, personal pronoun, who is a partaker more than either actors or recipient, taking in and is being taken up by virtues specific to the moment, to map some partaker agencies and what Reynolds and Evenson called more dance, that my participants and me walked, made, challenged, and became with in different space-time matterings. I argue that social justice and inequalities, gendered and racial harassments as a political, ethical, and material issues are not always raised by those represented or able to name and speak up as part of the social structure, but emerge through complex webs of power relations and ordinary everyday material and affective moments and encounters. In a forthcoming paper, I argue about the vital ethicality of mattering and moving in educational practices, as they might enable moments and experiences for subaltern who can't speak, as Spivak called, or as missing people, Bright Doty's term, to become otherwise. Drawing on the various affective and material interactions, I argue that matter and materiality have the potentiality to make impossible things and bodies to matter, the being and becoming of those who do not matter, their voice-body relations. I think and work with the vital materiality of movement to suggest experiences and feelings that cannot be said or seen in educational practices can be walked and made. By paying attention to things that matter to my participants in their stories, images, and experiences, I explore how they come to know, understand, and feel their bodies and in relation to others. And from these aims and my engagement with both participants and the wider literature, I propose these 4 central research questions. So how do Muslim schoolgirl subjectivity becoming emerge in between, in the interactions between humans and modern humans in their everyday ordinary practices? The everyday and ordinary is really, really important in my research. And what are the agential human and modern human accents in the subjectivity becoming of Muslim girls and how they matter with my participants? And also some methodological address as well, that how can creative, visual, digital, art-based and walking methodologies enable different ways of thinking and doing, theorizing and practicing in research?
Eva,
sorry
to interrupt. We can't see all your slide. I know that you've got lovely slides. We only see half because we've got the other ones on the left.
Oh, how come?
If you do slideshow
Ah, okay, yes.
Yeah, I know what you've got on your slide. There we are. Now we can see them all. Is that okay? Sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, because
It's okay.
I missed my notes actually if I do that.
Ah, okay. No worries
That's
then.
why.
We can see it all now. We just could only see half before. It's fine.
Yeah, is that okay now?
Yeah, I
Oh,
can
sorry
see all.
about that. Sorry about that. Anyway, the last question was how can multisensory participatory approaches open up new capacities for different data to emerge? And then we come to this, what I call assemblage term, PhEmaterialism, which, and I talk in my research that how these enables transdisciplinary mattering, as Carol Taylor calls, in my thinking and doing, onto-ethical epistemological ways to explore relational materialities between humans and modern humans. And to make these embodied human and modern human assemblages become and move, we, participants, researchers, and more, walked, talked, made, disrupted, relayed, and returned between September 2017 and June 2018. Movement and emergence, as the main aspect of my PhEmaterialist approach, helped me to craft, think, and work through walking interviews, photo diary making, and face-to-face interviews. What I call walking interview comprised of walking and interviewing through Skype video call and mobile technology. And this not only enables decentering the positionalities between bodies, spaces, feelings, objects, and movement, but also the actual physical absence and actual virtual presence of both researcher and participants. I'll come to this and explain this in my examples. Photo diary making as an art-based method was not different from walking, as they both enable multiplicity, heterogeneity, relationality, and affect. In the walking and photo diary encounters with moving in and out of spaces, time, bodies, bounded structures, and norms, many relational materialities between virtual, actual, corporeal, transcorporeal, material, immaterial, past, present, future emerge. PhEmaterialist multisensory approaches of my study is an onto-ethico-epistemological response to the call for finding possibilities for humanizing post-humanist methodologies, which Dernicus et al. They suggest, or many other scholars suggesting to attend to the social inequalities or the potential expansion of colonial violence through modern human relationalities. So it has kind of an ethical and political agenda in it. This means to be attentive to the vital agency of time when the white supremacy in line with terrorism, immigration, EU border, and channel crossing is more visible in the wake of unstable political and economic disruptions in the Middle East and Africa, taking over of Taliban in Afghanistan very recently, the rise of right-wing nationalism in Europe and the COVID-19 pandemic, and its uneven impacts amongst population. Walking images, objects, stories, and feelings are applied to voice and narratives to map different aspects of my participants' daily, ordinary practices and experiences that relate their bodies to others. So with transmaterializing the moments, experiences, and research, this methodology enabled rethinking inequality, poverty, and racial harassment in education beyond human relations. And one of the Nathan Snozer's quote was, Snozer's et al. Actually helped me a lot to kind of thinking about the material intervention into inequality and social racial harassment. They say that since racism, heterosexism, and ableism are not immaterial ideologies, but economic, institutional, biological, and medical matters, our politics have to intervene directly in the material processes and assemblages that allow them and support their endurance. Most of Muslim schoolgirls of my study experience their ordinary everyday life and commuting to and from school through material and affective relationships between episodes concerning their veiled, unveiled bodies, racial harassment, overcrowded familiar homes, fear of acid attacks and knife crimes around their home and school environment. The PhEmaterial turn to affect and materiality help to entangle with some of these vital relational materialities that sometimes stay beneath the normalized, unknown and vague, but do things to affect my participants' relations to themselves and others. During the walking and makings of every day, there were glowing moments when re-territorialized virtual different entanglement with an event of racial harassment deterritorialized the actual event of racial harassment. In these re-territorializing moments, my participants say and do what they thought they were supposed to have said and done in the past. And I really like this quote from Jane Bennett, where she talks about how everyday oceans ebb and flow and movement enable outside influences entering bodies, infusing and confusing their organization. And while I was doing my analysis, data analysis, I have visualizing all of these in my minds. And then this very beautiful, I think, provocative questions from Coro Ljungberg and Maggie McLaurin. I've also added to Padlet thoughts that if you like, you can work with it yourself. So for them, they're asking what could be data beyond presence, data as an error or an absent. You can read it then in your own time. But what I extended these questions in my study was that and ask, what happens if we research with assemblages of human and modern humans? What if we consider the mountain, shower, bus, swimming, tunnel, abaya, laughing, passing, walking, park, hair, sea, which emerged in my research encounters, not as a background, nature, or ordinary context, but things that do things to my participants? Can we work with these throughout the research? Can we diffractively think and become with these more than human agencies? So I draw a lot on Saint-Pierre and Louisa Allen account of data as beyond positivist conception, and I call it posthuman data as those kind of moments that are not given, observable, or pre-exist in reality, that can be represented through some form of constructionist or post-structuralist account. So the data emerged in the PhEmaterial encounters during our walking, making, and remattering with photos, the one that you see in the picture, was not obediently compiled with the codification rules, and it was not possible to categorize them in groups or themes. Rather, they exhibit, as Maggie McLaurin calls, a vibrancy that does something to the researcher. So I worked a lot with those, wandering and glowing moments. I really like this quote from Deleuze suggesting that some of these, also I was thinking that some of my data would be considered as no thing, which I come to this later, but as Deleuze suggests, they come kind of something that forces us to think. One part of my research is about prevent policy. So I'll briefly talk about this here. Racial harassment emerged in various research contexts. Most schoolgirls in my study and had experiences of racial harassment, either direct or indirect, involving family and at various times in school or street or public transport through different, what I call affective channels. Racist jokes, weird comments, blunt staring, and baffling questions, which agentically change their relations to their own body, other bodies, space, and time. Most participants express a sense of fear in relation to their body, their veiling, not veiling, whether they fit into their everyday ordinary spaces they use or not. And I argued that these racial harassment interactions, having onto power, using Brian Massumi's notion, generate different kinds of power, agency, and control, rather than disciplinary and discursive. They effectively modulate the body, enhance or diminish its capacity to act, feel, think, and desire. My research challenges some of the racialized, gendered, and hegemonic views of Muslim schoolgirls as risky, threatening, and with the potential to radicalization. I problematize the prevent policy, which is an anti-radicalization policy enforced into schools since 1st of July 2015 in the UK schools, and then later everywhere. So I problematize the prevent policy through affective turn and consider it as an affective partner of wider racializing assemblages that effectively modulate my participants' relations to their own body and other human and more than human bodies. I argue that the affective atmospheres around Muslims provide the conditions for the emergence of racializing encounters. But my research is not a policy research, rather a material, affective intervention into everyday experiences of Muslim schoolgirls of my study. I am also consider prevent policy in schools and wider counterterrorism strategies as a new engagement with time. So I see it as a temporal context of my research. And I'm not going to go through it in details, but just to let you know that schools are obliged to just be vigilant for signs of radicalization. And some of these signs, according to governments, is really is not something unusual for school children, like becoming increasingly argumentative, refusing to listen to different points of view, or changing friends and appearance, distancing themselves from old friends, no longer doing things they used to enjoy. And most of my participants have been in the process of on and off, they call it, they themselves call it, as those times and moments that they don't wear headscarf, or those times and moments, depending on the space as well, they do wear hijab. Some of them, they do wear hijab at school, but suddenly they change their mind, or vice versa. So all of these can be considered, according to these rules, as something suspected, you know? So they generally turns vulnerability into potential danger, what they're doing. And they considered, Muslim schoolgirls vulnerable, not because of real existing risks or extremist action, but because of potential future risks, which I wrote a lot about these in some of the published work. And here is an example of Farah, and in one of her conversations with her teacher, how her teacher, understand and respond to the prevent policy. My teacher said, if the child is too loud, too quiet, contributes too much, or don't contribute at all, there are signs you need to look out for. But that's so silly, because every child can be like this. My teacher found it silly too, but said that's the policy that they have to follow. I was like, this is so ridiculous. It could be any child, even small child. I found the concept of debilitation from Jasbir Puar really useful for understanding the forms of onto-power relations that effectively remodulate the capacity of the body to act. So it's a kind of, rather than be an oppressive top-down forms of power relation, it's mostly something that you effectively feel or entangle with. An affective atmosphere loaded with threat works as a form of debilitation. So in some of my forthcoming chapters and papers, I'll talk about these, how I understand this debilitation with onto power. But just for those of you who are not familiar with this notion, Puar argues that Israeli policies has supplemented the right to kill with the right to maim, which is an attempt towards the mass debilitation of Palestinians' bodies in order not to kill them, but to leave behind injured, debilitated bodies, facing social exclusion brought on by economic, political, and social factors. So most of the times, I worked a lot on vagueness and the way that my participants, they didn't know what they have to say or what they not have to say. They didn't know what to have to do or not have to do. And I think of this vagueness as one of the components of this debilitating machine, because in some part I suggest that it works if just kind of reproduce and produce that vagueness. And the picture on the right is from Inos. She's from year 12 and school in Peckham. As an example of a material moment, I just read through that that material moment. Within us, in our walking interview from her house to bus stop, then bus journey to school, fear emerged in between interactions of Inos's body, space, boss, me. Inos' fear materialized through her body-space relations. Her body felt and knew fear faster than her words, biting nails, continually tightening her scarf around her face, putting her hands on her face, avoiding looking at her phone, and the sudden fortunate end of the call because her data finished. I ask her if she can show me around. She replies, "It's a bit embarrassing because everyone is watching." She keeps fixing and tightening her headscarf. She seems nervous, trying to avoid looking at the phone at me. She travels on the upper deck, seeming more nervous on the bus than at this station, putting her phone down on her lap, rarely looking at it, biting her nails, continually asking, "Huh? What?" Not paying attention to me, as if her surroundings, the bus and other, need her full attention. Inos, who was encounter racial harassment at school from her Muslim friends calling her ISIS, explained earlier that she feels paranoid after the ISIS incident. I quote, "Sometimes I feel a bit paranoid, especially after that incident, that people just look at you and you think, oh no, they think I'm a terrorist." She has already had the affective experience of being called ISIS and still carries the fear of this recurring when she says everyone is watching. Her answers are full of no's and don'ts. As her fear moves, I feel it and how much this embarrassment has been provoked by me. I ask if she's nervous and if she prefers to end the call. She replies, "I'm all right. I don't know what to say. My data is gonna end now." So, and it ends. Inos's affective, material and immaterial, discursive, corporeal entanglement with her surroundings, the outside, materializes a different Inos to the one I met in her house, in the picture bottom right. Outside, she bites her nails and avoids looking at her phone. Inside, her body re-territorializes positively, covering the whole frame of the picture with her smile, body, her sister's body, and stories. I think I skipped this slides because I again talk about the Poir's debilitation and come to this another quote from Farah and how she kind of documents the material and affective consequences of monitoring as part of the prevent policy in schools. And this is interesting when she said that the issue is not about what they say, but about who they are. And I wrote extensively about these material moments. And this is another from Rima, another quote from Rima from year 12. And her quote is really interesting because I think, to me, it's exactly the definition of affect. She says that it's always in the news, generalizing all Muslims as threatening. I don't know, categorizing Muslims like this is not right. It's heartbreaking, and it's always around us. And because of how much it's around us, it just seems like it's bigger than it is. And I think it's very much referring to these affective entanglements. So let's come to the walking. Walking is a porous and lively transcorporeal experience. It enables the body I to be absorbent and creative partaker of its surrounding. Walking let the body becomes transcorporeal, transmattering moments and experiences when the body attends to entangled, affective and political materialities which move beyond the psychologistic, individually bodied accounts. Walking conditions, I'm using this from Brian Masumi's context, her definition of onto power, that does not cause in any traditional sense, it conditions, it reconditions the field of emergence. And I use this as a verb here, saying that walking conditions the body to move, create, absorb, leak, hold, bend, tear, heal, destroy. Bodies cross boundaries, seep into, onto, and out of one another. Transcorporeality removes the boundaries between outside and inside, offering a permeability to interconnections, interchanges, and transit between human bodies and non-human natures. So walking de-reterritorializes the material ordinary moments where legs as a horizontal maker rework the power relations, where these are not only hands, voice, eyes, mind that power the knowing, but also legs that make the knowing happen materially and effectively, moving across different assemblages. Walking and interviewing using technology opens up the vitality of the more dance, again using Reynolds and Evanson's notion, the newness and the intro of the relation to emerge. Most of my walking interview encounters with these participants, with my participants, happened on buses with everything on the move: the bus, bodies, desires, feelings, memories, researcher. Places where we walked, the park, their neighborhood or home were all part of the emergence spaces that my participants wanted to show me in response to the questions of show me places that are important to you. Throughout our research encounters, the assemblages of space and bodies changed. Sometimes I sat in my room whilst they walked to from school, like exactly here, and other times I was in school whilst they were on the bus. In walking interview encounters, we were actually in 2 or more different spaces, but technology traversed space and time, making us feel we were virtually in one place. Skype and my computer, as the modern humans agentically and diffractively extended or constrained the affective and material capacities of our doing beings and knowings. Skype walking interviewing disrupted the positionalities of the agential actant, the ongoing de-reterritorializing of my presence, body, and agency as ghostly, absence and presence in every material moment and movement. However, it created possibilities for new relations between our bodies and spaces where I sat and where my participants move, between my room and the bus, road and school, to happens. In those moments and movements, it wasn't just the assemblage I encountered, not just other passengers, bodies, sounds, buildings, wind, leaves, and objects, but perhaps the combination of researcher assemblages as they saw my side of the pictures and background, my room, books, the pictures stuck on my bookshelves, my body in the house. In those moments of walking interviews, my researcher's position as the only one who can see, know about, and analyze the participants' specific features deterritorialized by technology, my participants and the modern objects surrounding me in my room. The absence-presence of the researcher in walking interviews provides both enabling and limiting effective and material relations. And inspired by Haraway figuration for human and modern human technology entanglement, I see myself as a ghostly cyborgian researcher in our walking interviews. And occasionally it helped to create different capacities for the interview. For instance, it enabled my ghostly cyborgian in several participants' homes and bedrooms where I encountered their room, house, and their body in different positionalities and material relationalities, somewhere I would not easily acquire access to. So in this sense, it overcome any access issues. However, it has some kind of ethical issues as well, which I'll come to this later. So using digital technology, the Skype video mobile phone app enables a posthuman walking, where the virtual researcher who is physically absent in the walking virtually, but actually partakes as one of the agential actants of the walking assemblage. The actual absence of the researcher's physicality and her virtual presence open up more possibilities to walk around places that participants prefer not to walk physically with the researcher, or be seen as places to be seen as handpicked for the interview around school and neighborhood or in the bus. The researcher in the posthuman walking becomes a posthuman I, personal pronoun, with a posthuman I, the body organ. The I that it's physical, actual being has been de-reterritorialized, and the I that has found a new haptic more than optical function in the ear, stomach, and lungs, as Deleuze says. Deleuze and Guattari use the notion of haptic instead of tactile to move beyond the oppositional relations between organs. They suggest the tactile to move beyond the opposite. Oh, sorry, I'm repeating myself. Yeah, so they suggest the haptic engagement and sensory interrelationship emerge between the eye, ear, and limbs when the eye gains a sense of touch beyond its optical function. The posthuman I that walks becomes a more than human I and I. The I that is absorbent partaker, and the eyes that actually absent but virtually see. This posthuman haptic I and I follow the walking legs. It does not cross the road, get into the house, take a deep breath, but it does, as if the posthuman I and the posthuman I are movements in the background, both immaterial and material, virtual and actual, the posthuman moments of becoming. Inspired by Deleuze and his description of painting, experiences of painting as a diffractive sensory relations with our body organs, and engagement that give us eyes everywhere, in the ear, in the stomach, in the lungs, I propose that walking interview as a haptical engagement and methodology forces my participants and me to become and think, feel in multiple affective and complex haptic ways. And inspired by Haraway's notion of tentacular thinking as an ecology of collective practices of knowing and doing, I made this, and Braidotti's neologism of in-brain bodies and embodied brains. I kind of suggest walking gives the legs, eyes, and brain the capacity to legging our senses, memories, and desires, where all bodily functions become de-reterritorialized to thinking legs, walking eyes, in-brained legs, and legged brain. Sorry, it was a bit difficult even to read. I worked a lot with outside in my research, and I think it's a vital place for Muslim schoolgirls of my study, because most of racial and sexual harassment experiences happen there. And for most of them, outside intertwines with fear. As I travel, walk, and remake with them their material and affective everyday experiences, I realize that fear is carried in every moment of my participants' mundane practices outside, consciously or unconsciously. Particularly the journey to and from school for my participants in school 1, which was in East Dulwich, took about 2 hours every day in the bus, 1 hour to school and 1 hour come back. They commute between school, which locates in an partly affluent part of Southwark in southeast London, and where they live in Peckham or Elephant and Castle, so the deprived section of this borough. To explore the affective, material, and immaterial inseparability of the body from space, and to move away from public and its positive connotations as a place of whiteness in my study, I use the notion of outside instead of public. In most material moments, public for my participants has little association with shared, open, free, communal, rather with conditional risk and fear. So as I said, they all are aware of racialized and gendered intolerances towards Muslim, and most of them, they had these experiences. They feel that the public is not always a safe place for them, a place that belonging to it is conditional and uncertain. And I talk in some of my writing about mosque security culture, how they are part of that. And I also draw on some of the forthcoming paper on Springay and Truman understanding of walking outside as something that is never neutral. and how some scholars thinking about Flonner as, if I pronounce it right, as a kind of methodology. But what I'm arguing in my paper is that this is not the same. It's not neutral for Muslim schoolgirls. And also there is another person, Garnet Cadogan, in White in While Black. He explained how, as a Black man, he has to have a kind of a list of tactics to walk around New York City. And I'm drawing on these to suggest that how for some of my participants, particularly those who have kind of hijab as visualities as suspectness, is very dangerous and threatening experience. Here, my methodology enables my participants, myself, and other agential actants to move diffractively between spaces, bodies, and more than human bodies. And BOS 343 is the moving space where most of my walking interviews happen with School 1 in Dulwich participants. Walking interviews enabled me to entangle with my participants' body in the BOS's complex rhizomatic space. Part of everyday life of most of my School 1 participants is spent on BOS 343, on which they commute daily to and from school, as I said, about 1 hour to and 1 hour come back to house. And I use the body space choreographies from Carol Taylor, this notion, to suggest how they kind of experiences it as a kind of entangled experiences with the space. And also, what else I was going to say about this is, I don't know, I think this figuration, it reminds me kind of Donna Haraway's string figuration. But also I've did a lot of research about, sorry about my dog barking at the back. So BOS 343 is a seven miles comprising 45 stops compared to, say, like BOS 268 route in North London. I did a lot of research about this BOS route and what exactly kind of enabled and constrained for my participants in terms of their geographical area. And I also argued that how my participants relay and return with red string moving through 2 different territories, the Peckham and Elephant and Castles, where their homes are, and over 2/3 of the population belong to Black and Southeast Asian communities, about 71%, and where there is school located in East Dulwich, which with only 20% Black and Southeast Asian population. So I just work with these BOS and string figuring a lot. And here again, I really like to think about some of the example I give you before, how we can think of it as a kind of string figuring. And also, and this is another episode with Inos and how scary was the use of BOS 343, which I think, again, I'm going to skip that. And I come to this experience of Amira in a walking interview with Amira. The posthuman I enabled relationship with the vital materiality of living in an overcrowded house with 20 other people, her family, her aunt and uncle's family and grandparents. Amira is a British Bangladeshi Muslim girl wearing hijab. My interviews with her happen either on the bus or in her room. Amira and her family of 6 share her grandparents' house with 14 other members of her extended family. 20 in total live in a 6-bedroom house with just 1 shower. She shares a room with 2 siblings and a cousin, 4 to the room. 20 as an affect that encourages all kinds of leakages and unwieldy transmissions elicit a buzz, as Michelini suggests, traveling in many ways in Amira's everyday ordinary relations to others and in affecting me, my relations to Amira and her story, and into our research encounters. The affective vital materiality of 20 people under the same roof often forces Amira to do our walking interviews on the bus and to squeeze our Skype interview in her house after her shower when her siblings and cousins are at school and there are fewer people queuing to take a shower. Amira says 20 sometimes makes the bus journey a pleasant experience from her familiar crowded space. 20 materializes a more than of her subjectivity becoming a relational ecology in the making. Throughout our encounters, home regularly appears as an agential factor in most of my participants' relationships with their bodies, spaces, memories, and experiences. As a glowed data, it is impossible to ignore the vital materiality of my participants' housing situations, living in overcrowded households while on elongated waiting lists for more bedrooms, and how this relates to the co-constitution of bodies, the relations of these bodies to other bodies and spaces. And this is a material moment with Amira. And what I'm reading you right now, it's from those text boxes in my research. It happens suddenly, like a cot, dividing inside and outside. It's dark. Amira and her mother are returning from a parents' evening. Her mother's presence let us have a longer interview starting at school, then bus 343, walking home and into her house. The red string bus 343 pulls me in. Unexpectedly, I enter her house. Someone opens the door and quickly disappears in her room. We step in. I become with 20 that emerge through objects appearing, reappearing in the picture, shoes, piles of clothes, colors. We become stairs and go up. First floor, doors and clothes. Second floor, doors and clothes and colors. Third floor, towels and colors. And I am glued to the camera. She's out of breath. And the pictures are screenshots from the walking interview video. On the third floor, quietly she says, "We have planned to move out from this house for a very long time," in a low voice. Well, it's just never happened. It's quite hard to not live in your house, in your own house, for a long time. And I need my own space because A-level gets harder. The posthuman I, in those material moments and movements, was not just looking and aiming on a fixed target, but roaming with Amira's body, breathing, moving upstairs, coming across objects, noises behind doors, people talking, children playing and screaming. She pauses a while in the corridor, continuing softly. In this house right now, it's probably like 20 of us. I have got my uncles, aunts, cousins, and my grandparents. Our family has 2 rooms. My brother has one by himself. Me, my 2 sisters, and one of my cousins share a bedroom, and my mom sleeps on her own on sofa. It's a kind of squashed right now because we got stuck over to the moving. 20 embodies the affective and material figuration of crowdedness. 20 as a vital materiality does things to Amira's thinking, feeling, and knowing, effectively combined with any relations, experiences, desires, and feelings of Amira. 20 is the affective materiality of Amira's experiences of her body to other human and more than human bodies. As a doing rather than a number or quantity, it agentically affects the capacity of her body to act and enable or constrain her potentialities. Amira is with and of the 20 in any relations she materializes, any space she enters, any story she tells, any dream she actualizes during our research encounters. So I write down in my field notes what sort of relational materialities are enabled or constrained when a body space feeling is squashed body space feeling that got stuck over to the moving. And in some of the forthcoming paper, I draw on Morton and Harney's notion of remaining in the hold, and I also thinking through the Lauren Berland fantasies in the hold and cruel optimism as affective forms that emerge in response to continuous fantasies of the good life, which I'm not going through it right now because I want to move on to other examples, but in the Q&A, if you like, I can talk about that.
Shiva, just a heads up, it's just coming up to 6 o'clock. I know you asked me to let you know, so I'm just letting you know.
Thank you so much. So
no worries.
these are, hopefully you will see this in some of the forthcoming paper, how I worked with wall and how this wall as an object and as a materiality in my encounters with Farah, one of my participants, how we kind of experience these wall and move with them. And I work with transmateriality and transcorporeality with wall, Farah, me, and others. But also Maha as well. I'm using partaker I and I to entangle with Maha's experience. And I don't think I have time to just go through Maha's experience. Maybe just this part. Let me just go through this quickly. The moment that, as you see, the Maha's pictures for the photo diary doesn't have any, you don't see her own body, you don't see any sense of human except the picture at the bottom, the right, the left on the top, which is on Pride in London. But the others, you don't see any sign of her or her room or anything else. And when I ask, explain that you can take a picture of anything that is important for you in the room, she says that there isn't really anything. And she always laughs, and I hopefully write about these laughs as how these laughs, as Elizabeth Stengel talk about, it's always laugh at what is difficult than funny. So with Maha, I worked a lot with that laugh. And also that's the moment when the shark came in. She was talking about a cold wintry day with her siblings, and she has a lot of responsibilities for babysitting, and she used to live in her parents were divorced, and overcrowded housing in both houses. And this is the moment that pet shark, her pet shark actually appeared in green. And I was kind of really glowed and kind of affected by that moment. And it coming back to me that what are we actually mattering when we are mattering with pet shark? And is it actually, when she talks about pet shark, is she talking about herself? Or is Maha the sea? She talks about, we know only 1% of the sea and the sharks, and they are respectful. And then swimming coming with Maha, who was wearing hijab. And I used a lot of Reynolds and Evenson's water body talk in my forthcoming paper. So I think, the main question for me was that those pictures of nothing in there, how we can kind of entangle with those. Is Maha the pet shark who wants to live her life and be unapologetically herself? So I kind of argued in my forthcoming paper about Maha shark and shark Maha. Hopefully you saw some of these on in the forthcoming papers. So sorry about that if I make you tired. So what we're going to do right now is that you have the Padlets, which I call FemBag, and it contains videos of walking, interview, photos, and some boxes. Just go through it, see what you like. And take what you like, read or listen or watch, and then doodle your feelings. You can do it on the Zoom whiteboard that Sid is going to kindly open up for us, or you can do it on the paper, and then stick it to the Padlets.